Quality management. In this topic, we really want to get our heads around what quality is and what impact quality has on organizations today. So I want to work from this definition: the ability of a product or service to consistently meet or exceed customer expectations. There's some key elements in that. Certainly the customer perspective. So it varies by customer, which can be really challenging for an organization and put them in a place where they might be trying to please all the people all the time, which is really not particularly effective, productive, or even possible. So we often have to decide as an organization what level of quality do we want to deliver, and then help our customers set their expectations based on that. And I'll use some extreme examples. When I go to McDonald's, there is an expectation of the quality. The food will be healthy, not healthy, but not harmful to me. It'll be cooked appropriately because they use timers, so it's always cooked the same. The fries will be the same. The soda will always be a Coke product. It'll be in a yellow wrapper. There's all these things that over the years we've learned that when we go to McDonald's, that's what we should expect. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a time where you can't go and get your order and you leave the drive-thru and you look and that order is not what you expected. The cheese is missing off the cheeseburger. The burger is missing off the cheeseburger. The fries have been overcooked. And that's where we have a quality failure. But if that organization can consistently meet or exceed that customer expectation, then I would say that they are delivering quality. Even a place we look at like McDonald's, where someone might not say that's really a quality experience. If I went and got a cheeseburger, same idea, but I went to Cunningham's, instead of paying $1 for that cheeseburger, I'd be paying about $18 for that cheeseburger, but then I would have different expectations. I'd expect it to be cooked medium well, perfectly. I'd expect to be able to choose which cheese goes on it. I'd be able to have a different expectation of the quality of the roll that it's put on. So I would have different expectations going to a restaurant like Cunningham's as opposed to a restaurant like McDonald's, each one potentially being a quality experience because my expectations are different. So definitely a challenging item for an organization, but I think a couple elements for us to always take away is consistency and customer expectations. All right, so let's try to break this down a little bit. With quality, it becomes such a undefined concept, and we say, well, that was quality or that's not quality, and so as operations management people, we really want to know what we're talking about. And so I really like this. I've extracted this right out of one of our texts, and it breaks down. Well, let's look at a product first, and instead of just saying this product, let's say a chair or a desk or a car or a iPhone or whatever you've bought, it could potentially follow under these product dimensions. Performance, does it do what it is supposed to do? Aesthetics, does it look pleasing? Is it functional and ugly, or is it functional and is pleasing? Features, does it just do the basics, or does it have additional things that it can do, like our iPhone that now has a flashlight on it and a calculator built into it and all these other features that it can have? Conformance. Look closely at this one when you're going through our reading materials. Conformance. Does it conform to what we generally believe that product should look like? And I'll give you an example. My brother-in-law has a desk chair, and he considers it to be a desk chair, but it's a yoga ball. And to me, that does not conform to a desk chair. It doesn't have arms. I can't sit in it. I can't lean back. That is not a desk chair. That is a yoga ball. So does it fit what our general market would define as that product? A car, a bicycle, a boat. Does it do what we expect? Reliability. Will it perform into the future reliably, consistently? Durability, will it last? Perceived quality is that catch-all, and we might perceive the quality of something because of the brand that it is, or the origin of it, what country it came from. So there's some, it's almost a halo effect. If you're familiar with that term, you might want to Google it. Halo effect, H-A-L-O, where objects obtain quality not inherently their own, but because of some relationship they have. Serviceability is an interesting one. It's something we really are dealing with in today's product market, and that is that we come from an era, coming out of an era where items can be repaired, and we expect them to be serviceable, to be repairable, to be fixable, and well into the future. And I know I'm sitting here in this desk chair, as I've mentioned, and if a wheel was to break off this chair, getting a replacement wheel could be really, really difficult. And this chair may have been designed in such a way that it's not even really possible to put a replacement wheel onto it. So this whole chair would have to be thrown away, which is something that we don't normally attribute to being a quality product, as something that if anything goes wrong, I can't fix it. But I believe that concept is starting to change in today's society. There's a little bit different set, same concepts, but before I jump over to services quality, look at these a little bit, because what we want to take away is when we're describing something as being of good quality or bad quality, we need to be able to say, well, what about it? Well, what about its performance? What about its aesthetics? So it's almost like that continuum that we've talked about earlier on in the semester, where we talk about whether things a product or service, and it's the variability of inputs, variability of outputs, degree of labor, content, all these things. It's almost that same concept. So we want to be able to really get our arms around and our teeth into quality, and we can't do that if we just talk nebulously about quality. And I think these really help us break it down into something we can really talk about. Is it reliable? Is it durable? Does it conform to what we believe is that product? Real quick through services. Services obviously being different because a service can't be stored, it can't be warehoused, it has to be available when the customer wants it. So in our definition of quality, it was consistently meets or exceeds customer expectations. So it's that customer expectation. When does the customer want to have their hair cut, have their oil changed, have the car washed? It has to be convenient to them. Reliability, nice crossover there from the product. Will the service do what it's supposed to do? Responsiveness, a little different. Responsiveness has to do with the ability, and I'm making this definition up based on my own experience. Responsiveness I would define as the ability of the service to adjust to varying needs of customers. So can it flex a little bit, or is it a rigid service where you have to have it a certain way? Time, how long will it take to deliver that service? And I think of Hazel in the lawn care, and time to me is an aspect of her service, because if I'm hiring her folks to come cut my lawn and I work from home during the day, I really would prefer that they get there and in 10 minutes they're finished and gone. I really don't want them to come there and be there at my property for 6 hours. Now that doesn't necessarily affect my cost, but I feel like I just don't want them walking around, and I don't want to hear the noise, and also timeliness, how long it takes them to do what they do. When I go for a haircut, it's not a big job, so I like to be out in 20 or 30 minutes, and the person who cuts my hair is really, really meticulous, and he sometimes gets a little distracted and takes phone calls and gets talking, and I'm sometimes there 45 minutes, and that really kind of takes away from the service. Assurance means, do they stand behind the service? It's the guarantee. If it's not right, will they make it right? Courtesy is about that interaction with the person that's delivering that service. Are they hospitable? Are they sociable? Do they interact well with others? And then finally, we've got this little crossover from our earlier dimensions, or our continuum of product to service, is the tangibles. So even though we have a service, if there are tangibles involved, like shampoos and gels and things like that when we're getting our hair done, or if you take your car to the car wash and it has a wax and a wash and a spot-free rinse, will those products do what they're supposed to do? Are they consistent with the rest of the service experience, or are they crap? All right, so try to use those. We're going to try to apply those some in other elements this week, so you get a chance to shake those out a little bit. All right, so what? Who cares? Well, quality really has a big impact on, I put here a company, but on an organization. Lost business, lost stakeholders, lost sponsors, lost employees, financial liability. Most of you, I'm sure, are not old enough to remember the 70s. Ford had the Pinto. There's a book on it. You can look this up on Amazon. It's in the library. It's called the Ford Pinto Case. And you'll enjoy this, well, maybe not, because this was in the 70s, and Ford had designed this small car. It wasn't a particularly attractive car, but it had a small problem, and that was the way the gas tank was installed and the tail light electric, that if you got rear-ended, it would cause a spark from the tail lights, and it could make the car explode. So it really wasn't a great idea. But what was interesting behind the case, and if you grab this book, you'll find out the details behind that, is that Ford knew they had a problem. They realized there was a design flaw, but instead of recalling the car and fixing the problem, they decided that they would just wait and just pay the claims when cars exploded. And they just wait for the lawsuits to come in, and they figured that it would cost less to pay the lawsuits and kill people than it would to fix the car. Kind of a bad choice, but some of you probably do remember, I believe it was the 80s, they had the exact same thing happen with the Ford Explorer, where they knew they had a problem with the tires, and instead of recalling them and fixing the problem, they decided they would just wait and just see what it cost to fix the problems once these cars, and you might be able to Google up the Ford Explorer rollover problem. So Ford seems to have a little bit of a cultural issue with integrity, potentially, and certainly with quality. So there is a huge financial liability. You see the lawsuits these days with product failures, and certainly with service failures. That would be medical malpractice, as an example. Productivity, spent a lot of time talking about productivity already this chapter. The tie-in with quality, though, keep in mind, so if I produce 100 units today, but 10 of them are quality failures, they're not usable, then when I'm calculating productivity, remember output over input, then I don't put 100 into the output. I only get to put 90. And then those 10 got to be fixed tomorrow. And if they actually are fixed and worked, then they'll count as output, but I'll have put in a lot more inputs into them. So I'll actually have double worked them or triple worked them. So it really can affect your productivity. Obviously, it affects your costs, and it makes you less competitive, and it affects your customers' loyalty. So there's a lot of impacts of quality. It's worth doing right. Often, and I'll touch on, hit these, often we, as an organization, will get caught up in quality, and we'll think of quality in the short run. And we'll say, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to redesign, I'm going to have to fix this, I'm going to have to get a better supplier, I'm going to have to do more training, yada yada. Gee, that's really expensive, I really can't afford it right now, oh the heck with it, let's not do it. And we end up creating a product that may have recalls, may have service failures, may have returns, and so forth. And in the long term, it costs us a fortune, and we should have just spent the money up front to do it right. But let's break out the costs of quality. You'll see these as you go through our reading material, but I just want to touch on them. Appraisal costs, it's not a term we use a lot these days, but appraisal means the cost of inspecting and testing a product. That can include having to cut it open, break it up, send it to a lab, slow down the process to pull units and weigh them, whatever it takes. Prevention is what we actually prefer, but that's a big upfront cost because we have to do training and planning and design and maybe equipment. And so prevention costs can be kind of big up front, but then that should eliminate appraisal cost. The worst costs are failure cost, because then you actually produce a service or a product that's of poor quality. And if it's an internal failure, that means that we caught it before the customer figured it out. And so we were able to fix it and then turn it over to the customer. So we might have that in a car manufacturing plant where right before it goes out of the plant door, they run a final test on it and they find that the taillights don't work. Well, then they can fix them before they ship that car. With services, it's really hard to have an internal failure most service failures are external failures, which means the customer's the one that detected the problem. So with a product, if we delivered the car and then the customer took it home and realized that it had all these problems and then brought it back to the dealer, that would be an external failure. That would be the worst thing because it hurts our reputation, hurts loyalty. The customer had to bring it back, then we had to fix it. We might have had to ship it back again. So the external failure costs are the worst. Internal failures are next to worst. And appraisal costs are kind of the more expensive way to prevent quality failures. Prevention costs are really where we want to be. That's our lowest cost advantage. So that ties right into this concept. This one isn't usually mentioned in the reading materials. You're welcome to Google this, so you'll see materials on it. And the concept was this guy named Phil Crosby. He was a vice president at this a high technology company of the time. They no longer exist. I believe they've been bought by several other companies since then. But he got up and said this one time. He said, quality is free. And at the time, he was kind of mocked because people were like, oh my gosh, are you nuts? It takes all this money to train and to test and to do this and this and to take. Quality is really expensive. And what he was trying to do was to really stir people up and say, well, you think it's expensive to make something that's quality? Well, try make something that's low quality. It's really going to cost you. It's going to cost you in the long run. It's going to cost you in reputation. And so all of those long run costs are going to far outweigh the short-term costs of just doing it right to begin with. So the company, when he was working with them, they saved over $720 million, which at that time was huge, by improving quality before it went out the door. Part of that, and please watch for this in the readings, return on quality. It makes us really think about, well, okay, how much are we going to spend to produce a quality product, and what is that going to pay us back over time? And it ties into what we discussed earlier about trade-offs. So there's going to be some, I'm not going to get into these, but please warn you in the readings, take a look at the quality certifications. There's several of them. There's several awards to be discussed, and get a little sense of those, because you're going to see these at companies where you work, where you interview, possibly where you would like to have your career go. You're going to see these ISO certifications, in particular Baldwin Awards and others. I'm going to close with talking about this. It's called the PDSA cycle. We're going to talk about two different cycles in this quality discussion, but the other one we're going to save for next week. But the PDSA cycle is just starting to get our heads around how do we really intentionally infuse our organization with quality. And so I tend to start at the top of this over here in the plan spot, and that is we look at what we're doing and we really plan out how are we going to ensure that there's quality, what are the quality aspects of what we're doing, and how will our customers judge those. And then we'll actually do it, we'll implement what we're planning, and then study means to really evaluate. Study's not, I don't think, the appropriate word. I think maybe evaluate, analyze, review. We want to check and make sure that what we think is happening is really happening. And we certainly do that in the education process. We design courses very carefully, what topics we want and how we want to approach it and who's going to teach it and all this stuff. And then we go out and do it. Well, the study part is when you do your course evaluations. And we also have faculty members sit in on the classes and observe those classes and take notes. So we gather information to see if we're really achieving what we think, and then we act, we make adjustments. And then we replan, do it, keep doing it. And so it's an ongoing cycle of do it, check it, make corrections, do it, check it, make corrections. So just think about that cycle, because quality needs to be an ongoing situation. A lot of terms this chapter. There's going to be another set when we get into the other half of quality, but these are many that I've already mentioned here during my talk. You'll see some more details on these in the readings.